Who didn't want to be D'Angelo?
And I was, what, 7 years old. So I was so young, but my brain was so open for what it was.
D'Angelo wasn't just a singer. He had the voice of an angel and the soul of a man fighting demons. He was a movement, a mystery, and a mirror of pain hidden behind perfection. But fame became his downfall, and genius turned to tragedy. This is how D'Angelo's light faded forever. Let's dig deep into how it all started. The rise of a neo-soul pioneer. In the annals of music history, few artists have managed to capture the raw essence of human emotion quite like Michael Eugene Archer, better known to the world as D'Angelo. Born on February 11, 1974 in Richmond, Virginia, D'Angelo would grow to become one of the most influential yet enigmatic figures in contemporary R&B and soul music. But behind the silky smooth vocals and groundbreaking albums lay a story of profound struggle, artistic brilliance, and ultimately tragic loss that would define not just his career, but the very trajectory of neo-soul as a genre. The seeds of D'Angelo's musical genius were planted in the most unlikely of places, the pews of a Pentecostal church in South Richmond. His father, Luther Archer Sr., served as a preacher, while his maternal grandfather also held religious duties, creating an environment where gospel music wasn't just entertainment, but a way of life, a spiritual calling that would resonate through every note D'Angelo would later sing. The young Michael's prodigious talent became evident at an almost impossibly early age. By the time he was 3 years old, his older brother Luther discovered him playing full Prince songs on the family piano, complete with melody and bass lines, without any formal instruction whatsoever. This wasn't just child's play or random banging on keys. This was something far more profound, something that his family members would later describe as nothing short of divine intervention. By age 4, he had taught himself Earth, Wind, and Fire's Boogie Wonderland. And by 5, he was already serving as the main pianist for his father's church choir, a responsibility that would continue until he reached 12 years of age. Years later, reflecting on his influences and the foundation of funk music, D'Angelo would articulate his deep understanding of the genre's spiritual and cultural significance.
The best way I can describe it, to me, all right, I remember George Clinton saying something like this. He said, rock and roll is like the blues sped up. It's like a faster version of the blues. So funk is kind of like, it's not as slow as the blues, so it's right in the middle, you know. But I think the whole concept to me and what funk really means to me is, it's black rock and roll. It's when George said we have returned to reclaim the pyramids, that's what that represents to me. I don't know, it's like we're showing you and we're coming to reclaim what's ours, and this is ours. Rhythm and blues, what you call rock and roll, this is our music. You know, it's not just about, you know, no disrespect, but, you know, white boys playing guitars. He kind of invented this, and it's just like a reclaiming of that.
His father prohibited public performances during this formative period, insisting that D'Angelo hone his skills privately, away from the corrupting influence of the spotlight. This decision would prove prophetic, given how the pressures of fame would later consume the young artist. During his teenage years, D'Angelo transitioned to playing at his grandfather's more intense Pentecostal services, where he witnessed speaking in tongues, healings, and exorcisms, experiences that taught him, in his own words, to shut yourself down and let whatever's coming come through you. The transition from church pianist to secular musician wasn't without its challenges. Church elders repeatedly warned against the devil's music, creating an internal conflict that would plague D'Angelo throughout his career, the tension between his spiritual calling and his artistic ambitions. However, his grandmother remained supportive, encouraging him to use his gifts freely, regardless of the medium through which they were expressed. As D'Angelo navigated his teenage years, his musical horizons expanded dramatically. His brother Luther, 7 years his senior, played a pivotal role in introducing him to Prince's music, constantly playing albums and discussing concerts, fostering what would become a lifelong devotion to the Purple One's artistic vision. The family's approach to music was remarkably inclusive. They permitted diverse listening experiences, including classical rock artists like AC/DC and soul legends, with Luther emphasizing that music was music without genre boundaries. His deep appreciation for musical pioneers became evident when discussing his influences.
The first one to kind of like be the catalyst to kind of like point the way was Prince to me. That was it for me. And I was so young when say Dirty Mind came out, like, to me that was the shift. You know, that's when he kind of put his flag in the ground. And I was, 7 years old. So I was so young, but my brain was so open for what it was.
By his mid-teens, D'Angelo was already demonstrating the kind of musical maturity that would later define his professional career. Around age 16, he formed groups like Three of a Kind with his cousins and later Michael Archer and Precise, an ensemble that included 8 or 9 members. These weren't just casual garage bands. They were serious musical endeavors that dominated local talent shows with military-like discipline organized by his brother Luther. The pivotal moment in D'Angelo's early career came in 1991, when he was just 16 or 17 years old. He and his group competed at Harlem's legendary Apollo Theater Amateur Night, initially placing 4th with a Peabo Bryson cover, but returning to win 1st place with Johnny Gill's Rub You the Right Way, earning $500 in prize money. This wasn't just a talent show victory. It was validation from one of the most demanding audiences in music, the notoriously tough Apollo crowd that had made and broken countless careers. With characteristic entrepreneurial spirit, D'Angelo invested his Apollo winnings in a 4-track recorder, setting up a makeshift studio in his mother's home music room, which was adorned with Prince posters. Using equipment like an Ensoniq synthesizer and EPS-16 Plus sampler, he began creating the layered, textured sounds that would later become his signature. This wasn't just bedroom recording. This was the beginning of a sonic revolution. Simultaneously, D'Angelo was exploring hip-hop through his involvement with the group IDU, Intelligent, Deadly, but Unique, where he served as MC, producer, and writer. This experience during hip-hop's golden age expanded his musical knowledge through sampling sessions, introducing him to artists like The Meters and Band of Gypsies. The fusion of hip-hop sensibilities with his gospel and soul background was creating something entirely new, something that the music industry had never quite heard before. An amusing anecdote from this period reveals how D'Angelo's music was already making an impression on those around him, even in unconventional ways.
I used to sell weed to D'Angelo.
Really?
Yeah. Premier hooked me up with him. That's when I first moved to New York. And it's a funny story because when I went to meet him the first time, Premier was like, can you, bring some weed? D'Angelo gave me the address. It was like around the fashion district in Manhattan, like 28th or 30th from Broadway.
Right.
And he was like, when you go there, don't have anything in your hand. I was like, fuck you.
Anything in your hand?
I said, I didn't know what he meant. So I walked in and it was like literally like out of a movie. He was in this big loft by himself in the middle of the loft, sitting in a chair with a guitar, like writing songs. And I walked in and shit. I go up to him. He's like, what's up? Give him a pound. I'm like, yeah, I'm Premier. Good. He said, oh, that's what's up. What's up? Gave me another pound. Everything I said, that's
got
what's
a pound.
up. You had to give him a dap. I don't know if you know people like that.
Yeah,
Every
absolutely.
line is a dap.
Right.
And then I understood what Premier said when he was like, don't have anything in your hand.
The breakthrough that would change everything came when an IDU demo reached Jocelyn Cooper at Midnight Songs LLC, leading to a publishing deal after she heard him play ballads in her office, a mesmerizing blend of hip-hop, funk, and soul that left industry professionals speechless. Cooper was so impressed that she visited Richmond to meet his family and secure permission, as D'Angelo was still a minor. Gary Harris at EMI, who had been tracking D'Angelo since seeing a talent show video of him at age 8 covering Michael Jackson's Thriller, finally signed him to a record deal after 8 months of pursuit. At just 18 years old, D'Angelo made the fateful decision to drop out of school and relocate to New York City, leaving behind the familiar comfort of his Virginia roots to chase a dream that would both elevate and ultimately destroy him. His first major industry success came through collaboration co-writing You Will Know for Black Men United, a supergroup featuring established artists like Usher and R. Kelly. The track's success on the charts provided crucial industry credibility and set the stage for what would become one of the most revolutionary debut albums in R&B history. When Brown Sugar was released in 1995, it achieved something remarkable: platinum status and over 1.5 million sales in the United States alone. But more importantly, it established D'Angelo as the architect of what his manager Kadar Massenberg would coin as neo-soul, though D'Angelo himself would later reject this limiting categorization. The album wasn't just successful, it was transformative, blending traditional soul with contemporary R&B in ways that felt both nostalgic and futuristic. Hit singles like Lady, which achieved gold certification, and the title track established D'Angelo as more than just another R&B singer. He was an innovator, someone who understood that music could be both commercially viable and artistically uncompromising. The album's success wasn't accidental. It was the result of years of musical education, spiritual grounding, and an innate understanding of what made great soul music transcendent. As the accolades poured in and the industry took notice, few could have predicted that this meteoric rise would eventually lead to a tragic fall. The same artistic sensitivity and spiritual depth that made D'Angelo's music so compelling would later make him particularly vulnerable to the darker aspects of fame, success, and the music industry's often predatory nature. The stage was set not just for artistic triumph, but for a cautionary tale about the price of genius in an industry that often consumes its most talented artists. The burden of genius and the weight of fame. The year 2000 marked both the pinnacle of D'Angelo's artistic achievement and the beginning of his most profound personal struggles. His sophomore album, Voodoo, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling 320,000 copies in its first week and eventually earning Grammy Awards for Best R&B Album. But success, as D'Angelo would soon discover, carried a price tag that few artists are prepared to pay, especially when that success transforms an introspective artist into an unwilling sex symbol. The album itself was a masterpiece of musical craftsmanship, recorded with the legendary Soulquarians collective at Electric Lady Studios, Jimi Hendrix's former home and creative sanctuary.
We recorded the whole album at Electric Ladyland, Jimi Hendrix's home and studio. And when we went there, I mean, we really got into the whole, vibe of that place and Jimmy. I believe the spirits were there, like helping us and guiding us, do what we did.
The spiritual connection D'Angelo felt to that sacred space wasn't just romantic nostalgia. It was a genuine belief that the creative forces that had guided Hendrix were now flowing through him and his collaborators. D'Angelo's approach to recording was revolutionary in its authenticity and commitment to capturing genuine musical moments. The album fused funk, psychedelic elements, and groove-oriented songcraft, drawing heavily from J Dilla's influence, creating a sound that was both timeless and completely contemporary. But it was the lead single that would change everything, transforming D'Angelo from a respected musician into a global phenomenon, and ultimately into a man trapped by his own image. Untitled How Does It Feel wasn't just a song, it was a cultural earthquake. The track itself was sensual, vulnerable, and musically sophisticated, but it was the accompanying music video that launched D'Angelo into a stratosphere of fame he was utterly unprepared to navigate. Shot in seductive close-ups that highlighted his chiseled physique, the video turned him into an overnight sex symbol, earning a Grammy for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance while simultaneously beginning his artistic imprisonment. The irony was devastating and deeply personal. D'Angelo was naturally a heavier man, and the muscled, chiseled persona that audiences fell in love with wasn't his authentic aesthetic. An industry insider later revealed the profound internal conflict this created. He battled with his weight. The chiseled machismo man that people fell in love with, that wasn't his natural aesthetic. He was naturally a bigger guy. The touring cycle that followed Voodoo became a nightmare of objectification that would haunt D'Angelo for the rest of his career. Audiences, rather than focusing on his musical genius, began screaming for him to remove his clothes. Fans threw undergarments on stage, disrupting performances and systematically eroding his confidence as an artist. Tour manager Alan Leeds witnessed the devastating transformation. It took away his confidence. What should have been a celebration of musical achievement became a series of humiliating experiences that fundamentally altered D'Angelo's relationship with performance and public life. He began delaying shows to work out, eventually canceling at least 3 weeks worth of performances as he grappled with increasingly severe body image issues. The man who had once channeled divine inspiration through music was now trapped by the superficial expectations of an audience that seemed more interested in his appearance than his artistry. The psychological toll of this objectification cannot be overstated. D'Angelo, who had grown up in a deeply spiritual environment where music was a form of ministry, suddenly found himself reduced to a sexual commodity. The disconnect between his authentic self and his public persona created a cognitive dissonance that would fuel years of self-destructive behavior and artistic paralysis. Adding to his internal struggles was a profound grief that would push him towards substance abuse.
When he died, I remember that whole day and everything that happened. I remember, us going over to my cousin's house. We just came from church, and we went to my cousin's house, and, it was April Fool's Day, and they told me that he had got shot, and I didn't believe him. I thought it was a joke. And I saw it on TV, and, that night, that's when it started, really. And, I had him for about, these dreams for a couple of years, to the point where I think I had to go see someone, to discuss them, of what my life turned out to be and everything, and learning about his life and what he went through as an artist, I don't know. I mean, I kind of take it as to mean to pay attention, to pay attention to what he went through, and I guess the, mistakes he made or whatever, so I don't make the same ones.
Following the tour's conclusion in 2001, D'Angelo retreated to his hometown of Richmond, Virginia, seeking solace from the overwhelming pressures of fame. But instead of finding peace, he encountered a series of personal tragedies that would push him deeper into darkness. The deaths of his uncle, grandmother, and particularly the suicide of his close friend Fred Jordan triggered a descent into heavy alcohol and drug use. D'Angelo would later admit to cocaine use during attempted recording sessions for his third album, explaining, "I like cocaine because I could be a bit antisocial. It made me really open up and talk. It was good in the beginning, but it got out of hand." What began as a coping mechanism for social anxiety and grief quickly spiraled into full-blown addiction, derailing not just his career, but his entire life trajectory. The legal consequences of his spiral began mounting in 2005, creating a public documentation of his private struggles. He was arrested in Richmond for disturbing the peace, marijuana and cocaine possession, carrying a concealed weapon, DUI, and driving without a license. The mugshots from these arrests, widely circulated in the media, showed a man virtually unrecognizable from the chiseled figure who had graced magazine covers just years earlier. A week after his arrest, D'Angelo was involved in a near-fatal car accident that critically injured him and effectively derailed a $3 million record deal with J Records. The accident wasn't just a physical trauma. It was a wake-up call that forced those around him to confront the severity of his condition. His philosophical reflections during this dark period revealed both his awareness of the music industry's corrupting influence and his desire to maintain authentic artistic expression.
I mean, the legacy that we leaving them is kind of like sad. It's like filled up with like diamonds and Rolls Royces and Rolexes and whatever. But we're not really talking about any, internal, things that we need to discuss, or things that would be good for us to discuss.
In 2006, concerned friends and family intervened, sending him to rehabilitation at the Crossroads Center in Antigua at a cost of $40,000. But addiction, particularly for someone using substances to cope with fame, trauma, and identity issues, is rarely conquered on the first attempt. Relapses followed, and the cycle of recovery and relapse would continue for years. Another arrest in 2007 for solicitation in Manhattan further underscored his ongoing struggles, painting a picture of a man completely disconnected from his former self and his artistic calling. The multiple rehab stints and continued legal troubles contributed to his reputation for being unreliable, making it increasingly difficult for him to maintain professional relationships or complete recording projects. Perhaps even more devastating than the addiction and legal troubles was the profound anxiety that began to define D'Angelo's relationship with public life. Questlove, his longtime collaborator and friend, observed, "It's a struggle for him to do simple stuff like leave his apartment. I think he just has a fear of going out there. This wasn't just stage fright or typical celebrity reclusiveness. This was a paralyzing anxiety that made basic social functioning increasingly difficult. The combination of perfectionism, writer's block, and crippling anxiety created a vicious cycle that would keep D'Angelo away from music for over a decade. He rejected the neo-soul label that had helped define his early career, viewing it as restrictive and explaining, "I never claimed I do neo-soul, I make black music." Even the categories that celebrated his artistry began to feel like prisons. During this extended hiatus, D'Angelo's personal life continued to fragment. His relationship with Angie Stone, the mother of his first child, had ended in 1999, and by 2005, reports indicated that another unnamed girlfriend had left him, coinciding with a period where much of his family had also distanced themselves from his increasingly destructive behavior. The isolation was profound and self-perpetuating. Industry insiders described him as very eccentric and a recluse, unwilling to work despite having management and opportunities. The same sensitivity and introspection that had made his music so compelling had become a prison, trapping him in a cycle of self-doubt and artistic paralysis. Yet even during his darkest periods, there were glimpses of the artistic fire that still burned within him. Sporadic collaborations with artists like Common, Q-Tip, and Jay Dilla proved that his musical abilities remained intact, even as his capacity for sustained creative work remained compromised. These brief appearances served as both hope for his recovery and painful reminders of what the music world was losing to his struggles. The tragedy of this period wasn't just personal, it was cultural. At a time when R&B and soul music desperately needed authentic voices to counter increasingly commercialized trends, one of its most gifted practitioners was sidelined by the very fame that his talent had earned him. The burden of genius, combined with an industry and culture ill-equipped to support sensitive artists, had claimed another victim. a brief return and an untimely end. After more than a decade of silence, artistic withdrawal, and personal struggles, D'Angelo's unexpected return to music in 2014 felt like nothing short of a resurrection. His surprise release, Black Messiah, debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200, selling 117,000 copies in its first week. But more importantly, it proved that the artistic genius that had defined his earlier work remained not just intact, but evolved and deepened by years of struggle and introspection. The album's release strategy was as unconventional as D'Angelo himself had become. Dropping suddenly amid the social unrest following events like the Ferguson protests, Black Messiah felt urgently relevant, addressing themes of racism and violence with a spiritual and political depth that reflected D'Angelo's own journey through darkness towards some form of redemption. The timing wasn't coincidental. This was an artist who had always understood music as ministry, and he was finally ready to preach again. The album earned Grammy Awards for Best R&B Album and Best R&B Song for Really Love, validating not just D'Angelo's return, but his continued relevance in an evolving musical landscape. Critics and fans alike recognized that this wasn't simply a comeback. It was an artistic statement from someone who had survived his own personal apocalypse and emerged with something profound to say. During this period, D'Angelo's live performances revealed the vulnerability and authenticity that his struggles had somehow intensified rather than diminished. The vulnerability in D'Angelo's live performances during this period revealed an artist who had been fundamentally changed by his experiences, but whose core musical instincts remained as powerful as ever. The subsequent touring cycle, including the Second Coming tour in 2015, showed glimpses of the performer D'Angelo had once been, though friends and collaborators noted that the years of struggle had left their mark. Those closest to him understood the deliberate pace at which he approached his craft and his career.
He's one of those musicians that is, I am a musician, that's what I am. And he's from the church, you know, his mama's a pastor, and he plays at church, you know, and he's just a musician. This is what I do. If I put out an album, cool, you know, but this is just what he does, you know, and he's not a big fan of rushing anything, as you know. So
collaborator Raphael Sadiq noted in 2024 that D'Angelo was in a good space working on new music, suggesting that the artist had finally found some measure of peace with his creative process and public role. This period saw sporadic but meaningful contributions, including Unshaken for the Red Dead Redemption 2 soundtrack in 2018, a Verzeuse performance at the Apollo Theater in 2021, and I Want You Forever with Jay-Z in 2024. However, the pattern of canceled performances that had plagued D'Angelo throughout his career continued to manifest, suggesting that the underlying anxieties and health issues that had derailed his earlier comeback attempts remained unresolved. Show cancellations due to medical conditions persisted through 2018 and beyond, creating a growing concern among fans and industry professionals about his overall well-being. The most devastating blow to D'Angelo's emotional stability came in March 2025 with the sudden death of Angie Stone, his former partner and the mother of his eldest child. Stone died in a car crash at age 63, just one day after their son Michael Jr.'s birthday. The timing was particularly cruel. What should have been a celebration became an immediate tragedy that left both father and son reeling. Sources close to D'Angelo revealed that he was extremely overwhelmed by Stone's death and was so devastated that he couldn't attend her funeral. For an artist whose emotional sensitivity had always been both his greatest strength and most profound vulnerability, this loss represented an almost unbearable trauma. Stone had been more than just a former partner. She had been his muse during the creation of Brown Sugar, a creative collaborator, and the mother of his child. Even legends in the music industry had recognized the special chemistry between D'Angelo and Stone during their collaborative period.
D'Angelo remade it.
Yes, he did.
I love the D'Angelo version, by
I
the
do
way.
too.
You do too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I surprised him one time. He was doing a show, BET or something like that. And he didn't know I was going to be there, you know. And he got up on stage, he started playing Cruising, and I came walking out and sang it with him, you know.
Okay.
But D'Angelo.
Yeah, I mean, that first D'Angelo album was just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And I felt that was like one of the crown jewels of that project.
The grief over Stone's death came at a time when D'Angelo was already battling his own health challenges. Though the exact timeline of his pancreatic cancer diagnosis remains unclear, reports indicate that he had been privately fighting the disease for an extended period, spending months in the hospital and the final 2 weeks of his life in hospice care. In May 2025, D'Angelo was forced to cancel his scheduled performance at the Roots Picnic due to surgery delays. days, one of the final public indications that his health was seriously compromised. For an artist who had already built a reputation for canceled shows, this cancellation took on a more ominous significance in retrospect. Pancreatic cancer, often called a silent killer because of its late diagnosis and rapid progression, claimed D'Angelo on October 14, 2025, at the age of 51. His family's statement captured both their grief and their gratitude. "We are saddened that he can only leave dear memories with his family, but we are eternally grateful for the legacy of extraordinarily moving music he leaves behind." The timing of D'Angelo's death, coming just 7 months after Stone's tragic accident, created an almost unbearable situation for their son, Michael Jr. People close to the family expressed particular concern. "People are really worried about Mike right now. His mom died a day after his birthday, and now 6 months later, he's burying his dad." The tributes that followed D'Angelo's death revealed the profound impact he had made on multiple generations of musicians and fans. Beyoncé called him the pioneer of neo-soul, who changed and transformed rhythm and blues forever, while Jamie Foxx expressed his devastation. "God doesn't make mistakes, but this hurts like hell. Your music and your impression will be felt for generations to come." The most poignant tribute came from Miguel, who articulated what so many felt about D'Angelo's unique place in music history.
Who didn't want to be D'Angelo? You know what I mean? It's like, who of us didn't want to be D'Angelo? Like, his choices, the musicality, the songwriting, the feeling, the emotion in his music, and how it spoke to all of the greatness that we got from Prince, Donnie, we got from Funkadelic. He had all of that, as well as some of the je ne sais quoi. Not for me, not for anyone, I don't think. He did one of one, and we lost him way too early.
The tragedy of D'Angelo's story extends beyond personal loss to represent a broader commentary on how the music industry and celebrity culture can consume sensitive artists. His journey from gospel-trained church pianist to global superstar, to reclusive genius to tragic victim, illustrates the particular vulnerabilities that affect those whose artistry is deeply connected to their spiritual and emotional core. In the end, D'Angelo's legacy rests not just on his 3 studio albums, but on his role as a bridge between the classic soul tradition and contemporary R&B innovation. Despite producing only 3 albums over a career spanning more than 2 decades, his influence on artists like Beyoncé, Kendrick Lamar, Frank Ocean, and countless others cannot be overstated. Rolling Stone ranked him among their top singers, recognizing not just his technical abilities, but his cultural significance. If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.